right, so now we are going to move on to section 6.4. Right, now, in the first couple sections, we were talking about parallelograms. And a parallelogram is a special quadrilateral in which the opposite sides are parallel. And then once we know it's a parallelogram, we can say that the opposite sides are congruent. We can say that the opposite angles are congruent. And we can say that the diagonals bisect each other. All right, so those are all the traits of a parallelogram. Now, we are going to talk about 3 special parallelograms, meaning that these 3 figures, a rhombus, a square, and a rectangle, all have all these traits that I just talked about. So they all have opposite sides that are parallel. They all have opposite sides that are congruent. They all have opposite angles that are congruent. They all have consecutive angles that are supplementary. The one I didn't draw here is they all have diagonals that bisect each other as well. All right, so they all have these traits. All right, so all 3 of these, rhombus, rectangle, and a square, have every single trait that I just mentioned, plus they all have their own unique ones. All right, so the first one that we're going to talk about is a rectangle. So a rectangle is a parallelogram that has 4 right angles. All right, so if all you are told is that it is a parallelogram and it has 4 right angles, it is a rectangle. That is the definition of a rectangle, is that it has 4 right angles. All right, now, not only does a rectangle have all of the parallelogram traits, but they have a few new ones for that are just them. One, if it's a rectangle, then it's a parallelogram, right? And the definition is that 4 right angles, that's it. All right, so we know that's its definition. And then the other one is that their diagonals are congruent. So not only do the diagonals bisect each other since it's a parallelogram, but now the diagonals are congruent. So once again, it's something that you guys are going to have to remember. Right? You're going to have to remember that when it's a rectangle, that the diagonals are congruent. So they bisect each other and they're congruent. All right, so let's go through and do one example, then we'll move on to a rhombus. All right, so it says in rectangle RSBF, so once we know it's a rectangle, we know it's a parallelogram, and we know it has all the parallelogram traits, plus its diagonals are congruent and its angles are 90 degrees. All right, and it says SF is equal to 2x plus 15. Whoops, let me write that a little bit better. So SF is equal to 2x plus 15, and RB is equal to 5x minus 12. Well, since we know it's a rectangle, we know that the diagonals are congruent. So that means SF is equal to RB. And it says, what is the length of the diagonal? So we just substitute 2x plus 15 is equal to 5x minus 12. We subtract over 2x from each side. So we get 15 is equal to 3x minus 12. We add 12 to each side now, and we get 27 is equal to 3x. Divide each side by 3, and x is equal to 9. Now, that's not what they asked. So they said, what is the length of the diagonal? Same thing as I said before, is since both of these are congruent, you can plug this into either one you want, SF or RB. It will give you the same answer. Since it's a little bit easier to multiply by 2 in your head, let's just substitute it into SF. So we will say SF is equal to 2 times 9 plus 15. So then we'll say SF is equal to 18 plus 15, and SF is equal to 33. All right, so the length of the diagonal is 33 units, if it's feet, centimeter, whatever it is. All right, but it's important for you to know, rectangle is a special parallelogram, so it is a parallelogram. It has all the traits of a parallelogram, plus their diagonals are congruent. All right, that's it for this video, and we'll move on to rhombus next.